Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Dan and I'm here to bring you another FPL video. So in this one we're going to be breaking down a watch list for game week 7 and beyond. I've hand selected 5 players that I think should come into our thinking for this game week and beyond. If you have been a regular watcher of this channel so far, then you'll know I normally do about 4 to 6 players depending on the game week of players that I think we should be bringing in. In this game week I've changed things up very slightly, where I wanted to add a differential of the week moving forward, where essentially I take one player based on fixtures and form that's low owned in the game that I think can be considered a differential pick from short to long term, potentially giving us an upside in rank, right? So something a little bit different to consider in terms of our transfers. So without further ado, let's jump into the first player that's on this watch list. And of course, no surprises here. I don't think that Marcus Rashford has made this cut. So if you've watched my team selection video that I put out also yesterday, I did mention he was going to be making this list. And I think, to be honest, with the statistics in front of us and his and the eye test, he's proven that I think really he's definitely a must own or a must buy over these next few weeks specifically. So he's scored a total of 40 points. His XG per 90 is sat at 0.41 and an expected assist per 90 of 0.20. Now that is taken from the beginning of the season. Essentially I use understat.com. If there's any of you out there that do want to know where I get the stats from, as I know certain websites differ from time to time, right, by the odd decimal place or two. So that's where I get my statistics from. You can filter it past 3 matches, I think past 5 games, but I just do it as all games for the season so far. He's registered 3 goals and 2 assists. Of course, the majority of those stats coming from the Arsenal game that's just been played, where I think, to be honest, he looks back to the Rashford of old. I think that counter-attacking style suits him. It suits Manchester United. And I think, to be honest, we're probably going to see that in the games moving forward. Against Crystal Palace and Leeds, I'm not so sure we will be the weakest possession side. We have been in the past few matches and it's still resulted in a win, but I'm not so sure that Palace and Leeds are, heavily possession based sides enough. Maybe Leeds a little bit more, to the point where we'll have less possession and be able to hit them on the counter attack. I expect that maybe Crystal Palace set up with a low block. Leeds, I'm not so sure about what they do in terms of moving forward. They've looked quite an exciting team, to be honest. Again, even under new management, they've got that kind of Bielsa-esque style still, where they're quite attacking and tend to go for it in games, right? So there's potential there for Rashford to completely exploit that and absolutely explode in terms of points, right? So very happy, I think, to look at him and more than likely become an owner over the next few weeks. What I would say, though, is game week 9 is that tricky spot, right? It's against Manchester City at the Etihad. We do have a good record against them, and so does Rashford, but it is still a difficult fixture on paper. So you can do one or two things. If you're on the wild card and you're looking at game week 9 as that option, then I think ultimately you can still move him on, or bench him. Alternatively, if you're on the game week 8 wildcard, now that we've got the news of the Brighton and Crystal Palace game being postponed, I still think that taking him as that maybe 1 week punt against Leeds at home for game week 8 and essentially booking in yourself that transfer for game week 9 might not be a bad option. Of course, if you have to react to other things, potentially he gets benched, or potentially, someone else gets transferred and you play him. I still think that there's a lot of upside over at least up until game week 11 to warrant a transfer in. And of course, if you've already pressed the wildcard button as well, I still think that as a mid-price midfielder, he can probably contest the likes of Martinelli and of course Rodrigo being out, Trossard missing a game in the next week, or game week 8 specifically. I think he can easily surpass, or if not match, what these players can output, right? So I think at that price point, he's a very interesting pick. Moving into the second option, he's already made a watch list of previous, but I still think that he's got to be someone that we consider. Of course, his underlining numbers, there's something to behold really in terms of his XG. It's because the data pool is so small. He's actually almost reached a 1.0 XG at 0.9. His ownership has basically doubled in the past week. So he was at about 2%, I believe, last week, and now it's gone to 4.5%. So he is still considered, in my opinion, a somewhat differential pick. And with the likes of Ivan Toney and Mitrovic around him, maybe it is difficult to justify going for him. But I still think that over the course of these next few fixtures, up until game week 11, Newcastle look like a team that we should be targeting from both an attack and defensive point of view. And this man just fits the bill for me. I think, of course I have some bias because he is in my team already. But if we have a look at where he got in terms of positional play versus both Liverpool and Palace, I think West Ham, although on paper maybe looks a little bit more of a tricky fixture than Palace, I think he may be able to return for us. So I'm happy to own him. I think that the reason he makes that, like I say, almost number 2 really in this watch list is because I think that there's a goal coming for him, if not more. I think we had variants come into play last week where he had 2 clear chances, didn't put them away. On another day, he scores a double-digit haul, which would have been a phenomenal transfer in for me. But I still think over the course of these next few weeks, he could do some damage to anybody that doesn't decide to go with him. Of course, if you are on that Game Week 8 or Game Week 9 wildcard, I think again it's questionable whether you do go for him, whether you go for Tony, whether you go for Mitrovic, or a combination of the two. I think personally from Game Week 9 onwards that Jesus becomes droppable in terms of a striker position, where we can probably end up going with a Mitrovic, Tony, Isak, Mitrovic combination. But again, he's still in the punt territory. There's too much. There's still kind of not enough underlining data to really prove, but I do really like him as a pick, which is why he makes this list again. So moving into the third option, it is, of course, this man here, Kieran Trippier, another Newcastle asset. I don't think at the beginning of the season I would have anticipated putting 2 Newcastle players on a watch list of the same week, but they're just looking like a great team. A very different side to what we saw last season. They've obviously well improved under Eddie Howe as a manager. And of course, just the signings that they've made and just the overall squad looking a lot stronger. So Trippier, in terms of his underlying numbers, actually surprisingly, once I looked at them, weren't as good as I thought they would be. His XG per 90 is 0.05. I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that he's only really on set pieces in terms of providing threat. He doesn't really get into the box or provide any kind of shots on target outside of those direct free kicks. And the expected assists are still a little bit low on that 0.16. But if you consider that, again, because he's on so many set pieces, I think, again, he's a double-digit waiting to happen. He's a bonus point machine in terms of because of the amount of crosses and set pieces he takes. As long as he keeps a clean sheet, he's in and amongst those bonus points quite regularly. So I still think he's a very good option. Newcastle defensively are putting out some very good numbers. And of course, he's already registered 1 goal from a direct free kick already. So I think he's a fantastic asset to own. Only £5.2 million. I would definitely look to bring him in for the long term, not just the short term. And again, if you are considering a wild card, I personally feel like he's one of the must-haves over the next few weeks. If you don't go for him this week, I can understand why maybe you want to target that Bournemouth at home fixture in Game Week 8, right? But nonetheless, I still think he is a fantastic option. Moving then into our 4th pick of the week, it is again somebody that featured in the previous one, and we've already mentioned him on the Isak conversation. It is this man Mitrovic. Now, the reason why he's a little bit lower down the list, again, the same principle applies to what I did with the fact on the fixtures. He was playing Tottenham at the time, so Game Week 7 is now Chelsea. I think realistically, you can take the risk with him this week. If you are looking at moving your 4.5 million striker or someone else, to Mitrovic in terms of that forward position, I think even against Chelsea, I know they're looking at, I think, signing Potter. I don't know if that's been confirmed or not. I haven't checked before recording, but I know he had some kind of verbal agreement in place. This is a new manager that, yes, he's proven in the Premier League, but how quickly is he going to be able to essentially get this Chelsea team ready for Fulham this weekend? Probably none. He's not even going to have maybe 1 training session by the time this game takes place. So I think ultimately without Tuchel, without any kind of guidance, of course, they're still the same squad, but I think maybe there could be a bit of disarray where it actually might work in Fulham's favour, especially considering their form at Craven Cottage. You could argue Mitrovic is maybe higher up, or should be higher up in the watch list in terms of those underlining numbers. He's already scored 39 points with a 0.73 of expected goals per 90, 6 goals, no assists, but ultimately look at that heat map. He's in and around the box exactly where almost Haaland is. It's just, he's having a great season. Whatever he seems to touch in terms of the inside the box seems to turn out into either a goal or some kind of shot on target. He's had 1 big chance created and 6 chances created as well to boot. So very, very good pick, I think, for this week moving forward. And of course, if you go for him early against that Chelsea fixture, you've also got him for Nottingham Forest in game week 8, which I think is a very, very promising fixture for him, right? So you go 1 week early potentially, but you get the upside of owning him without having to make the transfer in game week 8. And I think, again, going back to that wildcard conversation, if you're looking at a game week 9 wildcard, I really do consider that this man may be a must own moving forward. So very, very strong pick as well. And finally, last but not least, as mentioned in the introduction, I've gone with a differential of the week. So it's this man here, Johnson from Nottingham Forest. He's currently only 1.4% owned and at 5.9 million. I think if you can't stretch as far as Isak or Mitrovic or Tony in terms of upgrading maybe your 4.5 million striker slot, I think this man could do maybe a little bit of damage over the next few weeks. I mean, they've got Leeds and Fulham. They haven't really maybe shown that much promise moving forward, but we know that he's on penalties. He scored 2 goals this season. I think at that budget price point, if you were going to take a punt on him, maybe over, say, someone like the likes of Rashford, or maybe you already own Rashford and you've got the flexibility, like I say, to upgrade that third forward slot. And if you haven't quite got that money to stretch as high as the aforementioned players with Tony, Mitrovic, and Isak, he could do some damage. I think. I think he's he looks great from an eye test perspective. I think he can definitely put away the chances that are presented to him. It's just a question of. It's based on the whole team, not just from an individual perspective. I don't know how much Forest are going to be able to do. But again, Leeds are a team that they'll be familiar with. Of course, they played them when they were under Bielsa, so maybe it's a little bit different under Jesse Marsch's team, but still a team they're familiar with, as are Fulham, both ex-championship teams in recent years, as are Forest. So I think we can expect maybe some end-to-end games here. And maybe Johnson is in the thick of it. So again, it's a differential of the week. It's someone that I'm personally not considering because I don't have the forward slot available. But I thought I'd bring something a little bit different to you guys, just to essentially add maybe a little bit of a spice to these watch lists, right? Rather than kind of the same old thing being sung across multiple content creators. So let me know in the comments if you kind of like this approach. If you do like this as an option, is he somebody that you would consider? Not just based on me presenting it today, but was you looking at Forest's fixtures long term? Is he somebody that you would consider bringing in? Let me know your thoughts, guys, as well as any other FPL related comments. I do try to reply to all of them. But yeah, that's going to wrap up the video, guys. So thanks again, as always, for tuning in to the content. Again, if you do like it, then please smash that like button below. And if you are new around here and you have liked what you've seen, then do consider subscribing to me as well. So I've got a live stream planned for the Saturday deadline, so again, feel free to join me on that, where you can see my final team selection, captaincy choices, bench order, and everything else. And of course, yeah, again, thanks for the support and watching for today's video. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.